In the quiet hours before dawn, a single train carried more than money. It carried trust. 15 men watched that trust from the shadows, studying every signal, every sound, every second. To them, it wasn't a crime. It was perfection, a plan so precise it could never fail. But perfection is fragile. And sometimes, the smallest mistake, a phone call, a breath too loud, a heartbeat too fast, can shatter everything. This is the story of the night Britain stopped. The Great Train Robbery. A perfect plan. That wasn't. Year 1963. The world after World War II was just beginning to catch its breath. Britain was slowly returning to economic stability. But a particular postal route, like a vital vein, carried cash from the north of the country to the heart of London. An old train, silent, that ran at night and carried millions of pounds in cash. No one ever imagined that one day a gang of criminals could stop such a train, because this route was known as the safest cash transport line in the country. No guards, no soldiers, no security checks. Just a locomotive, a few wagons full of money, and the silence of the night. But in a corner of London, a 15-man team was doing something many thought impossible. A precise, calculated, and ruthless plan. They were not street thieves, not desperate men. They were clever criminals who wanted to change history. Their leader was a smart, charismatic man, Bruce Reynolds. A man who believed that if you were going to do something dangerous, you had to design it like a military operation. They had spent weeks and months watching the train's route, noting the times, and putting all possibilities on the table. The weak point of the postal line? A signal light. If that light turned red, the train would automatically stop. And if the train stopped, they only had a few minutes to finish everything. Many nights were spent practicing. The map was spread on the table, timing planned down to the second, and everyone knew exactly what to do. One person was in charge of the signal, one the substitute driver, one in charge of loading the money, and the rest were guards and lookouts. For them, it wasn't just a robbery. It was a mission to enter history. Some of them believed this was the biggest thing they'd ever do in their lives. Some were just after the money. But they all knew one thing. If they made one small mistake, it was over. The silence that night was like the calm before the storm. The train was running on schedule from Glasgow to London. No one even imagined that a few miles ahead, a gang of criminals was ready to make something happen, that years later would still send shivers through Britain. The plan was ready. The team was ready. And only one moment remained. The moment when the plan turned into reality. The cold night wind swept across the rails. The clock had passed 3 a.m. and the surrounding roads were quieter than ever. In the heart of the darkness, right between two small stations, a sudden red signal light came on along the line. The train driver, seeing the light, according to the strict rules of the route, pulled the emergency brake, and the locomotive, with the squeal of metal on metal, slowly came to a halt. For every passenger, this was just a routine stop. But for those 15 men, this was the sacred moment. The moment when all the practice, all the plans, and all the stress found their meaning. Seconds later, out of the darkness, a military truck with no plates pulled up beside the track. Its headlights were off. Men in black clothes and leather gloves climbed down. Quiet, orderly, and without a sound. Like a special operations team. One of them quickly climbed up and reached the locomotive cab. A sharp strike with a metal wrench, and the driver slumped unconscious in his seat. At the same time, a substitute driver who had trained for months took his place. The train was now under their control. At that very moment, another team moved on the money wagon. Heavy sacks filled with fresh banknotes were stacked together. There were no guards, no cameras, no alarms, only silence and the excited breaths of the thieves. One member muttered under his breath, "This is like a beautiful nightmare." The money was loaded into the truck with care and speed. Everyone knew they had only a few minutes, because a second train was running directly behind this one. And if they didn't gain those seconds, everything would be ruined. In that darkness, only the sound of the rails and pounding hearts could be heard. And just as the last sack was secured in the truck, the leader said in a firm voice, "Move." The truck slowly pulled away from the line, and the main train with its fake driver was diverted off route so the police would lose its trail. In less than 30 minutes, the biggest theft in Britain's history had been carried out, without a single shot fired. That night, no one knew that the name of this operation would be repeated in history books and documentaries years later. The truck pulled away. Its lights vanished into the fog and the sound of the rails slowly faded behind it. The gang, breathing hard with trembling hands, looked at themselves. Heavy bags, fresh banknotes, and an unbelievable feeling. Success. They had a prearranged place, a remote farm, a house facing a hill with a barn and several outbuildings that nobody would notice. When the truck entered the yard down a dirt track, no one thought this hideout would turn into their prison. The barn door opened. The beam of a flashlight contorted faces. The money came out of the bags one by one. Waves of banknotes piled up like a silent green sea. For a moment, everything went quiet. Nobody spoke. The money smelled like freedom. But freedom has a price. And the price here was fear. The gang leader, in a calm, measured voice, announced the work plan. "We stay here 3 days. No one goes out. No news is sent. First we count everything, then we decide." The plan sounded simple, but people were not simple. Some saw the money as a lifeline, others as a document that would change their lives. Disputes slowly began. About shares, about who would be on watch, and most importantly, when the money would be spent. On the first night, some stayed up until morning counting the bags. Figures were recorded, lists were written, numbers were crossed out in a notebook. The sense of victory was in the air, but there was another feeling too, a sense of vulnerability. Because they knew the police would sooner or later find out what had happened. And the longer the money stayed, the greater the temptation to make a mistake. On the second day, one member, a man named Tommy, couldn't hold himself back. He made a call to the city, just for 1 or 2 small purchases. He said he had to go quickly, or the money in his account would disappear. A few people looked at him with scorn, but Tammy left. It later turned out to be the first point of failure. Tammy's hurried, careless departure left a trail. Banknotes with similar serial numbers, a cigarette pack with the metal fragments on it, and a purchase receipt showing the store name and date. A small trail, but enough. Police prefer these kinds of traces to gunshots and big clues because people live in their small mistakes. On the third night, tension in the barn reached a boiling point. The argument over division flared. One member, who had acted most suspiciously from the start, said coldly, "Anyone who goes out today won't come back." The sentence spread like blood in water. In the night's silence, one of the guards noticed that someone had left a glove during the bag's movement. A leather glove with sticky stains. The guard picked it up with a trembling hand and found a strand of hair stuck to it. A hair that could be linked to a police lab. An insignificant mistake that now raised 1,000 questions in their heads. When it became clear Tommy had gone and left evidence behind, the leader ordered everyone to leave the place immediately and move the money to a second hideout. But that hasty move left more traces. The truck's tires had cut patterns into the soft earth, footprints that could be tracked by police dogs at night. As the group gathered in a disorderly nighttime rush, another thing revealed itself. Suspicion and doubt. Everyone began to suspect everyone else. Many of those 15 men now saw one another as strangers. And of course, the media had begun to smell blood. Anonymous calls reached radio stations and newspapers. Vague reports that a large sum had been stolen and that a remote farm might be the hiding place. In the end, what they had hoped would be a safe place to divide the money and vanish, turned into a mystery full of clues and mistrust. And every mystery has a way to be solved, especially when the police take advantage of the opportunity. The sky was still dark. Morning fog spread across the ground, and the distant barking of police dogs echoed from afar. The gang still thought they were one step ahead of the law, but the reality was the opposite. The game had ended the moment Tammy made that damn call. Using the trail of banknotes and a tiny clue, the glove that had been left behind, the police managed to trace the truck's route. From there to the farm, from the farm to the city. And now, the net was closing in on them. Early in the morning, the crime unit and police blocked all roads. While the gang members were still caught up in internal arguments over dividing the money, the roar of engines and the shouts of the police cut everything off. "Police! Get down!" The money was still piled in the middle of the barn, but the sense of power they had felt just nights before had turned into a cold fear. Some surrendered, some ran, and some, with no plan, opened fire, breaking glass, the sound of bullets, and the beams of flashlights falling on their faces from every direction. It was the end of a dream. A big dream that lasted only a few days. In the following weeks, the police arrested the gang members one by one. Some escaped with their share of the money, but their freedom was short-lived. The trail of serial numbers on the banknotes still led back to them. In court, the images of the barn and the confessions of a few members revealed everything. The heist, which was meant to be the perfect plan of the century, became one of the most notorious arrests in history. But one detail always remained. A large portion of that money was never recovered. No one knows exactly where it was hidden. Even years later, pieces of those banknotes would turn up randomly in strange places. An old, broken wall, a rusted safe, or a box buried underground. That money became a legend. And this heist served as a ruthless reminder that no plan is perfect. even when everything seems calculated. One small mistake, like a single call, can blow everything apart. The final image. Wet money on the floor, cold handcuffs on wrists, and sirens still echoing through the night. A night that was supposed to be a celebration of freedom became the night of their fall.